Let's talk about China. Every few years, the market gives you a moment, right? A moment when the narrative kind of breaks, not in a malleable way or a flexible way, but in a kind of like break your face up kind of way. When the numbers start to defy the headlines, when a nation everyone once dismissed suddenly starts to rip the script apart. And right now, what nation is that? Yeah, that nation is China. Despite the tariffs, sanctions, smears, and Washington's full court press show to slow it down, China's economy is surprisingly, to some, setting up for a surge in 2026 that almost no Western analyst saw coming. I'm not an analyst, but I include myself in that. And the irony? Well, it's the United States, with its political chaos, its inflation addiction, weaponized trade policy, accidental handing China that leverage that it actually needed. This isn't a story just about GDP, it's a story about power shifting in real time. So, what do I mean? Well, the numbers the US don't really want people to see is, well, it's the numbers that traders love, right? And they contradict every narrative we've heard. For the past 3 years, Western media has told us the same thing. China's collapsing. China is finished. Manufacturing is dead. The property crisis is dooming China. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs, yes, Goldman Sachs just raised China's growth forecast above the IMF consensus expectations for 2025 from 4.9% to 5% and from 4% to 4.7% in 2027. That's not a slowdown, that's an acceleration. Exports. Chinese exports are growing rapidly at 5 to 6% annually. And this is during a year where the United States has tariffed them to hell with 100% of tariffs early in 2025. Let me say that again. The people in China are fighting back, right? What does that tell you? Well, it tells you competitiveness, number one. It tells you scale, number two, and a manufacturer machine that simply refuses to die. America's first salvos and firing shots have backfired and failed. The US threw everything it could at China. 100% tariffs, semiconductor restriction, blacklisting pressure, threatening allies to decouple, and yet Chinese export grew approximately 8% in 2025. And as Goldman Sachs said, Chinese exports of chips, semiconductors, auto parts, they're all rising steadily despite American pressure. This is the part that Washington doesn't really want traders like us to see, but China is no longer a low-end economy. You can tariff toys, you can tariff garments, but how do you tariff dominance in electric vehicles? How do you tariff dominance in solar tech, energy storage, rare earths? How do you tariff industrial robots? You can't, and China knows it. So at the core of this new China surge is one thing, the 15th five-year plan. And it's been approved with full government backing. People in the West laugh at these plans, but they really shouldn't, because think about it. Every time China actually releases one, what happens? It executes. This one focuses on new energy, tech, advanced materials, upgraded chemicals, metals industries, next-gen semiconductors, autos, EV dominance, export market share. They always focus on these huge overarching plans and they get the job done, unlike everywhere else that has a 5-year, democratic cycle. I'm not trying to deride democracy, but it doesn't work in certain ways in terms of like national champions and champion industry, directing capital into certain markets and making them become monolithic behemoths, right? Like they have done in EVs. But here's the moment that I think traders need to really pay attention to. Trump and Xi meeting in South Korea. The US comes in threatening 100% plus tariffs. China walks in with one card. Rare earth minerals, boy. Rare earth minerals. America needs them. China controls them. Within hours, what happens? United States backs off. Tail between its legs. Begging in hand, right? China is going to delay rare earth export restrictions. And they are going to use rare earths as a negotiating tactic, as a bludgeoning tool. And so far, it's worked, right? Be honest, if America had the upper hand, it wouldn't be negotiating soybean purchases. It would be dictating those terms, right? But here is something that everyone should be thinking about. It was a quote that I saw flashing across Bloomberg. It said, for the first time, China is positioned more as an equal. In macro terms, what does that mean? That's code for the balance of global power has well and truly shifted, right? Do you remember China Shock 1.0? It was cheap labor. It flooded the world with low-cost goods, toys, plastic stuff. It destroyed Western manufacturing, with some agreement as well from manufacturing. China Shock 2.0 is very different. This time, China is crowding everyone out. Europe's high-tech industry, Japan's auto and electronics sectors, South Korea's semiconductor margins and their plants, and the United States' ambitions in electric vehicles. It's all being crowded out. That's China strategy 2.0. Other nations may lose 0.1 to 0.3% of their GDP, but think about what that means. China's rise now subtracts from Western growth. They are an equal on the stage, and if anyone's not admitting it, they are absolutely deluded. The electric vehicle inputs into the supply chains is something that China has dominated and controls. And this is a huge misconception among Western audiences, especially Western commentators. They like to say, oh, China has a consumption problem. China saves too much. China's people don't spend. Well, Beijing is changing all of that. The 5-year plan explicitly calls for rising household incomes, increased consumption, reduced savings rates, and monetarily developing and increasing per capita expenditures in a variety of ways. And they're not just talking about it, they're actually doing things. They're cutting interest rates. They're expanding fiscal stimulus. They're accelerating credit growth. Meanwhile, what's going on in the United States? The Fed is trapped. Cuts are being begged for. Inflation is spiking. Don't cut. And the Treasury collapses under interest rate expense. China isn't trapped. America is, if you actually think about it, right? Now, here is probably the favorite Western talking point to counter all of that. Oh, Chinese property crash means doom. But as Goldman Sachs have been pointing out, housing starts are already like 75% below peak property investment. And the GDP, the share of GDP or the share of property, the contribution to GDP is ever decreasing, right? So that means the macro impact is actually shrinking. What does that mean in trading terms? It means the downside is already well discounted, already well priced in. The upside is actually not. And this is why Goldman's outlook is so important. Despite the property slump, China is still actually accelerating. And that means one thing. The economic engine is no longer property. It's now tech. It's manufacturing export, industrial self-reliance, supply chain mastery. Exactly the sectors that global markets just cannot ignore, right? So let's actually be brutally honest. America spent years, actual years, trying to contain China. Tariffs, sanctions, allied pressure, media campaigns, smear campaigns, tech bans. None of it worked. Not a single strategy slowed down China's strategic growth. And now what? China controls critical minerals. China leads in EVs. China dominates solar. China owns global manufacturing. China is advancing in tech self-reliance. And China is growing and accelerating and exceeding expectations, while the West struggles. Traders don't really care about these politics. We care about the data. We care about the leverage. We care about the momentum. And China has all three of those. You can fight the narrative, but you can't fight the numbers. And at the moment, China is bossing things, right? So how do you position for it? Chinese equities, if you actually look at these sectorial plays in terms of their comps in America, they are severely, critically undervalued in terms of PEs, in terms of forward multiples, in terms of market share, in terms of future growth, and in terms of all kind of discount mechanisms that you can think of. It's going to be a few interesting years ahead. And I think the rotation is going to occur way quicker than people actually realize into like Asian tech and into Asian dominance. They ruled the world for 3,000 years. And the 100 years of humiliation is something that is not oft forgotten. So let's see where it goes and where it takes us. I'm Justin Madden. This is the House of Trade. Share, like, and subscribe. Ciao for now. See you later.